accueillir la ministre de la Santé, Ginette Petitpas-Taylor, and the Minister of Veterans Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defense, Seamus O'Regan.
Wow.
Right?
Liberals,
Right?
welcome to Halifax.
Right?
Woo! This is fantastic. So much energy. Love it. Give yourselves a round of applause. Nice.
It's great.
I am so happy to be joined here today talking about something that I am very passionate about, mental health, with two of my favorite colleagues who are looking for water. Okay, I was wondering what was going on over there. Oh, thank you very much. You're such a gentleman.
Thank you, Celina.
Oh, thank you. So we're talking about mental health today, and most of you would know that I've been very public and open about my mental health experiences. But yeah, thank you. And from time to time, I check in on you guys, but we're gonna have a casual conversation up here on the stage, okay? Is that okay? Yeah, I think so. And so I'm going to kick it off with a starting question, and then we'll just have a conversation about it. All right, so I'm going to start off with Ginette, and I'm going to practice my français maintenant. C'est bon?
Oui.
Oui? OK. La santé mentale est très importante pour chaque communauté dans notre pays. Et récemment, notre politique a l'agent pour santé mentale, particulièrement pour les jeunes 25 ans et below and under. Et moins, and less, oui. How is our policies important to people across the country, and how does your past experience integrate in that, not just from a policy perspective, but how you deal with Canadians and continue to do the hard work that Canadians brought us here to do?
Mais Céline, merci premièrement pour la bonne question. Puis j'aimerais dire un grand bonjour à tous les gens qui sont parmi nous aujourd'hui, puis aussi pour les francophones qui sont dans la salle. Ça fait bienvenue au Canada Atlantique. Puis Celina, je dois vous dire que moi, j'ai commencé ma carrière comme étant travailleuse sociale. J'ai pratiqué le travail social pour à peu près 24 ans durant ma carrière avant que j'ai entré en politique. Et puis même avant que j'étais travailleuse sociale, je dois vous dire que j'ai un membre de ma famille qui était atteint de maladie mentale. Moi, je suis la plus jeune d'une famille de 10 enfants. Et puis mon frère le plus aîné, quand moi j'avais 13 ans, avait été diagnostiqué avec une maladie comme étant schizophrène. Et puis, dans les années 80, je dois vous dire, quand on parlait de schizophrénie, ce n'était pas quelque chose qu'on parlait ouvertement. Il y avait un stigma qui était absolument attaché. Et puis, souvent, nous ne savions pas où aller pour les services. Fait que souvent, les gens me demandent pourquoi je vais rentrer dans ma carrière comme travailleuse sociale. C'est fort probable beaucoup relié à mon passé, puis ma famille, et puis mes expériences que j'avais vécues comme enfant. Fait que comme travailleuse sociale, j'ai eu le privilège de travailler avec des gens dans le besoin. Et puis finalement, j'ai souvent vu qu'il y avait un manque de services. Mais c'est quand même quelque chose qui touchait tous les Canadiens et Canadiennes. Puis je le sais, durant la campagne 2015, quand nous avons cogné aux portes, souvent les Canadiens nous disaient qu'il y avait un grand besoin de ces services-là. Ça fait comme libérale, comme ministre de la Santé, je suis extrêmement contente que notre parti a fait la santé mentale une priorité. Une priorité qu'on a finalement investie au-delà de 10 milliards de dollars dans le domaine de santé mentale et des soins à domicile. Puis jusqu'à date, nous avons signé 4 ententes bilatérales avec les provinces et les territoires pour s'assurer que les argents vont être investis dans ce domaine-là. Et puis, il nous reste encore des provinces à finaliser les ententes, mais ça va quand même très bien. Fait que comme libérale, comme ministre de la Santé, je suis extrêmement contente que nous avons fait la question de santé mentale une priorité.
So Seamus, sorry, Minister O'Regan.
Say it again, though.
So Ginette brought up how stigma plays plays a role in how we deal with mental health. And as the Minister of Veterans Affairs, can I throw the same question to you? Because you work with a very particular group of individuals who, they go off and they defend and protect our country and often feel that they may have to do that for themselves too. Can you talk about, again, how your past experiences have been integrated into your current role and how that helps you have a lot more empathy in the role that you have right now, a very important role that you have right now?
Yeah, where to begin?
Yeah.
It kind of worked out amazingly, I think, for me. I always say that when I'm talking to veterans, I mean, there's no way that me in my position can ever say that I can relate completely to what veterans are going through. But I can say, given my experience, that I'm sensitive to it. So I'll tell you a little story. When you ask me that question, what is it about my past? Not to name drop, but it's a good place to name drop. Let me quote the Prime Minister. Because he said there were a few things. I grew up in a military base, which he knew, 5-Wing Goose Bay in Labrador. Yeah, Labrador in the house. I hear Labrador in the house. Right on. And I have a brother who serves in the military, Lieutenant Commander Daniel J. O'Regan, and he's an Esquimalt. And he's been in the military for quite some time. So, I constantly hear from him about how things are going. And very interestingly, he sat me down when I was out visiting him in Esquimalt months before I knew I would have this position, had no inclination I would have this position. And he said, he at that time was in charge of our Naval Fleet School, which is in BC. Normally he's in charge of the navigation department, but now he was more involved in human resources. And he said, we're not doing this right. People are falling between the cracks. And what I'm talking about here, I'm not talking about people who come back from Afghanistan, for instance, and are, suffer from PTSD as a result. I'm talking about, because, don't get me wrong, that is a huge part of my portfolio and what we've been trying to do. I'm talking about people who just are going through the transition of living in a very structured environment like the military for 25 years or 10 years. Knowing exactly where their paycheck would come from, knowing the person who works at the base gym, knowing where everything's done for them so that they can concentrate on their jobs. And the problem is that they are just then let go. I'm doing town halls right across the country with my deputy minister and Admiral John Newton, who's there in behalf of the Minister Sargent, Chief of Defense Staff. And in other words, we're all trying to get our handle on this. And one of the big things that came out 2 weeks ago was the base gym. And when I was growing up in Goose Bay, the base gym was a big deal. And suddenly you go to the base gym every day, and that's where you see everybody. And you may not just work out. You may just be going to hang out. That's fine. But it's where you see everybody. And then suddenly one day you're not allowed in. And that's really tough. Making that transition is really tough. And so that's, the other thing the Prime Minister knew about me was I had a really tough time after I left Canada AM. Really tough. Now, I had a great job. Decent wage, good benefits. Incredibly interesting. I was in TV and with CTV for 15 years. I had people looking after me. I had a structured environment. I knew what my paycheck was. I knew everything. And then nothing. And, I'm a positive person, so you think that there's going to be all sorts of opportunity. And I will create opportunity. And I will be positive about this. But it was rough. It was really rough. And I went from a guy who probably drank a little bit too much anyway to a guy who was drinking a lot. And it was tough. And somehow I made it through the campaign, and then, and was still having a tough time. And then the Prime Minister took me to one side. He brought me up to his office, and he said, "You're not 100%. You are not 100%. And I need you 100%. And I left Ottawa with literally just the shirt on my back and went to treatment. Thanks. Thank you. First of all, let me say this, and I'll probably say this on behalf of three of us. How amazing is it that I can say that and get a round of applause? just value that moment, how far we've come. So on the upside, in all my work with Bell Let's Talk, another reason why I think I can relate to people is all the work that I had done on Bell Let's Talk, and frankly all the work that my colleagues Jeff Hutchison and Bev Thompson, Marcy Ian, and Autocratic Canada, and what we did on mental health for years. We really pushed the issue. So the upside is that we can talk about it openly. Now the challenge for all of us is making sure that we're there for one another when people are brave enough now to come out and talk about this openly. Now that we've removed the stigma, the worst thing that we could do is get people comfortable with talking about it in the workplace, amongst their family and friends, having that light shone on them, and then not being there for them, leaving them alone in that light. That is the worst thing that we can do. So we've got to be there for one another. And veterans have extremely high expectations. Younger veterans have extremely high expectations about us being there for them, as well they should. Right. And I mean, we can get a bit into it later, but let me assure all of you how seriously we take this, how seriously my colleague Kent Hare took this before I got into this position, that $10 billion in 2 years that Liberals have put towards new veterans programming, benefits, and services. The biggest influx of money for our veterans that we have seen in decades. In decades. And as my two colleagues up here on this stage know, and some of my staff who are attending here, and my long-suffering husband who has to listen to my rants, it drives me absolutely ballistic that the crowd across from us, after 10 years of stagnation and neglect, have the gall to say that we are neglecting our veterans.
Yeah, shame.
It is absolutely amazing to me. But you know what? I try not to get too heated. All I really have to do is get up there and recite the litany of benefits and services that fall under that $10 billion in the past 2 years. And that pretty much silences them.
Thank you very much. So if I could put it back to you, Ginette, what do you see as the future of mental health? What do you see as some of the challenges we still have, but what are some of the great opportunities that we still have within the context of mental health now that we're talking about it, we're raising it amongst our friends, neighbors, colleagues, we're getting applause here. What more is there?
Well, I think as Seamus indicated, we've certainly shined the light on mental health, but I think we still have a lot more work that needs to be done in that area. We certainly are addressing stigma, but I would also say that we still have a lot more work to do in addressing stigma. Just last week alone, I was in Nova Scotia, and I had the privilege to meet with a youth council for the Darren Fisher's Youth Council. And one of the conversations that we talked about during that youth council was exactly this, the issue of mental health. And the youth in the group indicated just that we have to do more when it comes to addressing the area of stigma. The other thing as well that youth council mentioned that I thought was very interesting as well, that more work needs to be done in the issue of navigation of services. We recognize that there's a lot of services that do exist in our communities. However, many individuals, when they're in need, don't know where to go to get the services that are needed. So I think certainly a lot of work needs to go there. Government certainly has a responsibility. All levels of government do. But also, we have to look at the private sector as well. And I'm happy that you mentioned Bell Let's Talk, because we certainly recognize the amazing, amazing work that they've done, the amount of money that they've raised. And when you stop and think that that hashtag is the most popular hashtag in Canada thus far, it's quite amazing the work that they've done. So we certainly have to leverage the work at that area. But more than that, I think as well, we have to look at global champions when it comes to mental health. I know I've had the privilege as being the Minister of Health of traveling to several countries, and many groups indicate that we need global champions when it comes to mental health. We have to bring this to another level. So I'm challenging myself as the Health Minister for Canada to make sure that we organize that, because we certainly have to continue having this conversation in order that we can provide mental health services for us here in Canada, but also internationally.
And we, you know, a lot of what we're doing, and I want to assure you, you know, so many of the Liberals who are in the room who, you know, when you're knocking on doors, you're taking these questions. I think it's, you know, I want to make sure that you know that a lot of what we're trying to do here, a lot of our policies are derived from our own personal experiences. You know, just in case we haven't made that point emphatically enough to you. I mean, whether it's Ginette or me or you. Because to watch your progression as a member of Parliament, but your absolute honesty, Celina, is breathtaking to me. Like, you are amazing. And trust me, you know, that vulnerability, and we all know online with social media, is not easy, and you have taken a lot. And, you know, I've given you hugs sometimes, and you've squeezed back. You know, like it's.
He gives the nicest hugs. They make you all gushy inside, but it really is important. And how many young people are on a youth council? Oh, we see some hands up. That's really good. You know, when I first got to Parliament, I had a grade 11 class from Donald A. Wilson in Whitby. Whitby, come
Whitby's
on,
in the
Whitby,
house?
yes, Whitby's in the house. Love the Whitby crowd, Team Celina, Team Whitby. They wrote a letter in saying their top 5 priorities. Number 3 was mental health. I was so excited. I went back to the school and I said, oh my goodness, thank you for writing this. And one young man at the back of the room who looked like he wasn't really paying attention to my presentation said, why are you here? Why did you come? And I said, oh, because you wrote me this letter. And then he asked again, but why are you here? And I said, because I wanted you to know that we care. Like, you wrote, and I wanted you to know that somebody is listening. And yeah, and I think that at the end of the day, and what each and every one of you are doing here, and why we see a full house here, is because you want us to know that we're listening. So the vulnerability piece, we need to have that vulnerability. We need, stories are sticky. Let's share the stories and get rid of the stigma, right? And I think that's a critically important component.
Vulnerability is strength. I really do firmly believe that. Vulnerability is strength. Yeah.
But then you get the other side where individuals say, and read through, you know, at MP Celina on Twitter, and it's sometimes you need to resign. You can't do your job. And we need to sort of move that aside and understand that vulnerability is our strength. So Ginette, can I go back to you and just ask, in terms of your work in social work, let's just take this back a little bit. Have you seen, because you said 30 years, right, that you were in that field?
I'm not that old.
Oh, sorry. How long did you say? I thought I heard 30. Maybe I didn't hear that.
I worked in
She's a
social
child
work.
protege.
Very close, 24 years.
24 years. So you've worked in social work for 20 years. What changes have you seen from when you started to now as Minister of Health? What changes have you seen? What would you like to share on that?
Well, and again, I think we're kind of hitting on the points again, but when I look back when I started my career in social work, you just didn't talk about mental health back then. And access to services is still a challenge today, let's be frank, but it was even more of a challenge back then because oftentimes people just didn't get the services that they needed. So when we look at the challenges, we certainly have come a long ways, but we all recognize that we still have a long work to go. And ensuring that Canadians have access to services absolutely has to be key in all this. And have access to services in a timely fashion. I'm sure Seamus and Celina, both of you, when you're in your ridings, you hear that a lot. So more work needs to be done in that area as well. And I don't think that we can stress that enough. Having been a social worker, I can tell you I had a phenomenal career working with many individuals. I was able to journey with them through so many very difficult situations. And you're absolutely right, Seamus. Vulnerabilities are absolutely strengths, you know, and showing those vulnerabilities. And accepting that we need help during those dark days are not always easy. But when you do make that choice and you accept the help that you need, it absolutely is transformational for individuals. And I've been privileged that I've been able to journey with people and see that transformation. And it's pretty amazing and very powerful.
Pretty amazing.
I want to add too, and I think this is on the issue of mental health, we can't forget the importance of this. Healthcare, as most of you policy wonks in the audience know, is provincial jurisdiction. I mean, exclusive provincial jurisdiction. And the federal government, just is not in the business of telling the provinces what to do within their jurisdiction. And healthcare is clearly their jurisdiction. And yet, through the leadership of your predecessor, Jane Philpott, and Bill Morneau, and the Prime Minister, we demanded, with an increase in healthcare funding, that they had to spend it on mental health. That is phenomenal. That was a big deal. Big deal. Big deal.
But Seamus, can we also, and I'll put this to both of you, we cannot look at mental health in a silo. No. As if it happens by itself. So there's been a number of investments, and I'm going to shift our focus a little bit, because as a woman of color, as a Black woman, there's often a lot of taboo, shame around mental health. And when we think about the supports that we have housing, we have health care, we have clean water, we have all of these supports, the infrastructure around us that allow that support to happen. When we look at some of the tragedies we saw in our Indigenous communities, there was a wake-up call for Canadians and the investments that we needed to make in some of those communities and around the different issues that help or hinder your mental health. So maybe we could have, if you could look back on some of the budgets and some of the things that you're seeing. I know we've made significant investment in Indigenous infrastructure, in social programs, in housing, but we have a lot more to do. And better is always possible, right?
And we're at Veterans Affairs, we're increasing demand. There's been an increase, about 26% demand on mental health services in my department. Now, part of that, I think, is the normal course of things. But some of it is because we have put a significant amount of investment in frontline mental health services. And so word gets out very quickly in the veterans community, who most of them are extremely adept at social media. And word has gotten out that we are a lot better at this than we were before 2 years ago. That services have gotten better. And so in the last budget, we got about $40+ million just to kind of keep ahead of the curve, because our problem is, we're starting to whittle away at the wait times that we have at Veterans Affairs, but because we're getting better at it and we're getting results faster, we're getting more demand. So we're just trying to keep up with that. What we've said from the beginning is, if you come home broken, we will help you mend. And mending is physical injury, and it is mental injury as well. And we have a much greater appreciation of that now than we used to. Pension for life, which is something that we announced in December, and we're hoping to have passed by April. Thank you. Yes, through a lot of. I would say that, this is certainly something that's a team effort. It is something that we went to the doors on. We did say we would bring back a monthly pension for life, and we are delivering on that. We are delivering a monthly pension for life. And just so I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but in case you ever get this, because sometimes it does come up, there was a Pension Act developed 100 years ago, but the problem was it kind of treated everybody in a few categories. And it didn't get into the particulars of what's holding people back from getting back to work, to being okay again, to reestablishing themselves into society. So 2006, all the political parties, all of us, got together and said we got to do something differently. And it was called the New Veterans Charter. Some of that was bang on, because it really put the focus on vocational rehabilitation, on getting people better physically and mentally. Like that, and that was a good thing, as opposed to here's a paycheck, every month and there you go. We're really going to concentrate on getting you well. That was a good thing. What a lot of veterans weren't comfortable with, and a lot of Canadians weren't comfortable with, was the idea of a lump sum, right? Like the idea that we would give you $220,000 and off you go. And that's supposed to last you for the rest of your life. You manage that money and off you go. Well, you know, Walt Natinchuk, who's my deputy minister and former chief of defense staff, you know, told me that he would be bedside with veterans in hospital when they'd returned home, and their families would be saying, please do not give us that money. Do not give him that money. So you know, how do we make it so that it, you know, people can, you know, absorb it, right? That was the idea. That's the whole idea behind a monthly amount. What the Conservatives did was they just entrenched, right? Lump sum, that's it, that's it, that's it. There was no change. This whole new Veterans Charter was meant to live and breathe. We were meant to make changes to it all the time. And now with Pension for Life, we're making a significant change, right? We are finally going to give people a monthly amount, not take the lump sum and divvy it up, but a guaranteed tax-free monthly payment for life with all the vocational rehabilitation they enjoyed before. And we designed it, I'll finish here, I promise, but we designed it around mental health. We know with PTSD that the onset of that PTSD can take hold 5-10 years down the road. It can take place when you think you're doing okay and you're at work and you're doing well, and it happens. So we developed a system that is, you know, kind of complex. It's not always easy for me to stand in the House of Commons or in a town hall and tell a veteran exactly how it will affect them, because we know now how complex these problems are. We know they're not simple. And we know that we have the capability now to address complex problems in sometimes a complex way, but why? Because it's effective, because it'll get them better. We can tailor this now. So it's more difficult for me to pitch this and more difficult for you, if you're asked about it, to pitch this, you know, to explain it cleanly, but I can tell you we're on the right track. And veterans know, many of them know that we're on the right track. And when I go to town halls across the country and I have the opportunity to explain this and the emotion and drive that's behind it and the, you know, the work that we've put into it, more and more and more of them get it. They get it. We are on the right track, and I'm looking forward to that legislation passing in April.
Bravo. Thank you, Seamus. Ginette, if I could go back a little bit and touch again on your social work. How important is it to work with other ministers when you think about affordable housing or the Canada Child Benefit or any of the other social programs that our government has introduced? How does that integrate? Or if you could just talk a little bit about how that integrates with the work that you have to do, which is the health. The absolute barometer of our successful country is the health of our country.
When we look at the social determinants of health and health outcomes, I guess we have to look at the social determinants of health. And for that to be done, it's absolutely paramount that we work with all ministers and everyone around the table, because we all have a role to play with respect to health outcomes. I know, hats off to Jean-Yves Duclos. We work with him very closely, Minister Philpott, Minister Bennett. The list goes on and on and on. But the health portfolio is not just my portfolio, it's everyone's portfolio, and we all have a responsibility to play there. And it's been so important, I know, for me, for pre-budget consultations this year. I had the privilege and the opportunity to meet with many groups and individuals across this country. And I just really want to mention really two in particular, because, you know, we've been able to make significant investments for these people. But in February of this year, I had the privilege of meeting with a group of women from the Federation of Black Communities, a powerful group of women from Toronto that came to visit me. And it was amazing to me, the stories that they shared with me and the challenges that they faced in getting the help that they needed with respect to mental health issues. And I was so proud when I opened the budget in March, or in February this year, that we were able to provide them with $19 million of funding for calls for proposals and, you know, in the area of mental health and support services. So we're listening to Canadians, we're making sure that the investments are there. So that was really a good news. Yeah, absolutely. Another group as well that I was very pleased that we were able to provide some assistance to this year was the autism community. We've certainly heard many individuals, many families that have children and loved ones that live with autism and autism spectrum disorder. So this year we were able in budget 2018 to announce $20 million in that area. So again, we have to be listening to Canadians and to make sure that the requests that we make, you know, are going to reflect, you know, what is needed. But it's absolutely paramount that we work together in order to address these issues. And when we want to see health outcomes, we have to look at the social determinants of health. And that means, housing, it means education, it means all of that. And we all have to work together in order to effectively, deal with the needs.
I'd like, absolutely. I think it's a really important point too, just generally in society, not just in government, but for all of you in your workplaces and amongst your families, that we're there for one another, that we really keep an eye on one another. I think that's so important. We repeat that to veterans all the time, and they do. Like they're good. They keep an eye out for one another. They're a very tight-knit community. I was really lucky that when I needed, and I keep repeating this, mental illness doesn't have to be catastrophic. It doesn't have to be a newspaper headline. It just means you're not well and you can get better. And the beauty is, most of the time, you do. You do get better. It's not catastrophic. But you got to look out for one another. I had Dr. Andrew Fury, who was on the stage earlier, was one of those friends who could confront me and talk to me about that. Heidi Bonnell, another really good friend who's here. The Prime Minister, my brother was incredible, probably led the charge, my family, and my husband, who's looking at me right now, kind of liking it, but kind of not liking the fact that I just drew attention to him, but he was amazing. And that's who you count on, So my advice to you is to be there for one another. And we're learning that as members of Parliament too. We're learning this is, it is a stressful job. It is a unique job. We all signed up for it, and most of us love it. Love this opportunity. Love the work. But it's tough with the travel. It's tough being away from your family. It's tough being away from your homes. And that's why Celina is, I think for all of us, just for her honesty, someone that we just look to. That's all. It's really important that we talk about it too, in an open and honest way, and it's not always easy. So I tip my hat to you again, Celina. You're just awesome.
I appreciate that you...
Let me ask you, though.
I appreciate that you acknowledge the support that is required. This job is not easy, not because we're afraid to do hard work, but because oftentimes we are away from our families, we're not in our ridings, and even if we are in our ridings, we're at events and we're doing other things. So my husband's here as well, my rock, and everybody knows what he looks like if you follow my Instagram feed. Many people recognize him through Instagram, so that's great. But that is critically important. So we have about less than 10 minutes left. I am going to just ask you to each probably just what would you like our fellow colleagues who are here to know? What advice, what anecdote, what story, what do you want to end off with that when they leave this room, they say that I came out of this mental health discussion and that was the piece of advice that I thought would be most practical, most rewarding for them to go on with? I could start.
I want you to start. I was just going to... See, our issue right from the beginning was that she was listed as a moderator, and I think Celina is, just anybody who follows her Instagram or Twitter or whatever, you're like, Oprah is looking at you now. Why are you moderating? This I could never get. So will you please take it? Take it now.
And I just have to add, this is funny because we thought we weren't going to have enough time to fill 45 minutes, and you give politicians a microphone, and here we are.
And here we are, we're filling 45 minutes. So I'm just going to draw from the video I posted a couple of days ago where I was having a terrible morning on Wednesday. It was very difficult to get out of bed, and I think over the last month with all of the social media sort of joys and hates that came out of it, I've been really having a tough time bouncing back. And, number one, it's totally okay to not be okay and to have a not so great day. And, you know, the second is just to take some time. Take some time for yourself and understand that what you're feeling is completely valid and what you're feeling is completely okay. And I often self-stigmatize where I'm beating myself up.
Oh, the worst. We're the worst.
The worst
on
kind
one
of
another,
stigmatization is your own, the one that you give to yourself. You're too lazy. Why are you doing this? You need to get up. So just take that time to know that it's okay to not be okay. And I think on our side, we'll just keep listening. We'll keep listening because we want to ensure that we put forward policy that's going to really allow us to do the hard work that Canadians sent us here to do, sent us to Parliament to do. And the only way that we could do that is if we are vulnerable enough to listen actively, not just to hear what you're saying, but to listen. And so that for me would be something that I challenge you to do, is to take care of yourselves and know it's okay to not be okay, and challenge myself to continue to do the exercise of listening.
That's great, Celina. I guess just a few words. I think for me, there's no health if you don't have your mental health. And not being scared to ask for help when we need it, to me, is absolutely key. It's not a strength of weakness. It's not a sign of weakness. It's absolutely a sign of strength. And again, I can tell you through my personal journey, through my professional life, and my personal life, I have seen those many steps forward and how many people have really blossomed through many struggles. So once again, I guess that's what I would leave you with. You know, there is no health without mental health, and it's a package.
Seamus, I'm going to turn it over to you. You see that little clock down there, buddy?
4 minutes.
I keep a very tight ship.
I'm used to Canada AM. I'm not allowed to go over 3 minutes. Commercial break.
I'm going to put you to commercial.
Okay. I just think, first of all, again, the fact that, look at this crowd to talk about mental health. This would not have happened, I would venture to say, 5, 10, or 15, definitely not 15 years ago. There is a thirst for information. There is a hunger for it. No one, absolutely no one, likes to feel that they're alone. Everybody wants to know that there's somebody out there who can at least be there for them, somebody who will at least listen to them, you know? We may not always get it right. I think it's a really important message that we tell Canadians that we're trying to get it right, that we really are trying. That we are not impervious to criticism. I'm more than open to criticism. But it's more than just having our hearts in the right place. It's about empathy, it's about listening, it's about getting the best scientific information that you can. Veterans Affairs, we're going to open up a center of excellence that, we aim for it to be, world class on PTSD. And that was a campaign commitment that we made. That was a campaign commitment that we made that, once again, we are fulfilling $17.5 million. We've now established a network of 4,000 mental health professionals in Veterans Affairs Canada, so that, when they have that moment, when you recognize, and we all know this, when you recognize the moment that you need help, that it's there for you. Again, there is nothing worse than if we heighten expectations and we're not there to help people. And we are the party with that heart and with that mind. We are the party, when you think about this, with a leader whose mother was a pioneer for mental health in Canada, Margaret Trudeau.
Absolutely.
You think about it. I think about that now. When Margaret was speaking in the 80s and the 90s, in the 70s, about mental health and what she was suffering, and you were not getting a kind reception then. She suffered all of the stigma. She suffered all the prejudice. You think back. And then that is a proud legacy, I think, on a very personal level, beyond politics. That is a proud legacy of her to leave us with. Not just as a party, as a country. I think that took such guts back then, and we are reaping the rewards of that now. It's up to us to follow through on that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. So in the closing few seconds that we have, I just want to leave you with a story, because Seamus, you talked about our Prime Minister, and one of the reasons that I am comfortable in talking about mental health and talking about anything that I talk about, microaggressions, braids, racism, anything, is because we're under the leadership of a Prime Minister. We work with individuals who really have given us a platform to be open, to be bold, to be brave, to have uncomfortable conversations, to have the audacity to go where others may not want to go because it's too difficult. And that's the leadership that we have with the Prime Minister. And I gotta tell you, in September, I had, I think, one of the worst times that I've had with my mental health, and I shaved my head. And I came into caucus, and this is the leadership that we have. It's not just about policy, it's about people. And I came into caucus, and I sit in the same chair every time. He was kind of milling around my chair, and I thought, oh my goodness, I started sweating. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to talk to him. I'm bald, I'm gonna have to talk to him. And he said, Celina, how you doing? And I said, I'm okay, because I'm trying to put on a brave face. And he looks at me and he says, your hair looks beautiful. Could you imagine if every corporate CEO took that time to know that one of the people that they were working with was having a bad day and just said, it's okay to not be okay. So with that, I'm gonna thank you, Ginette.
And thank you.
Petitpas-Taylor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Seamus.
You speak volumes in your numbers here today. Thank you.
Thank you.